See, this is why we have the pre-done show. Welcome everybody, try again. Welcome to Flory Models live show. I'd say we'll get going in a couple of minutes. This is literally just a thing where I can yap. You can see, make sure the sound's okay. I was explaining then, which is like classic example of that obviously the lip sync has been out with the live. It's a cable. I found what the problem was. We're using a different cable which is shorter than the old one, but actually it's another 200 millisecond delay I need to add onto it because the audio feed is obviously different to the video feed and because it goes around the houses, we've spoken about it before, and it's amazing how it goes on there. So there we go. Is the sound any better, guys? Let us know in there. If it's too quiet, I'll put it up. Silence is golden. Right, I could do that. I can turn it off if you want and I can mime it. I have little cards and I'll put up and do it. So tonight, lightning is back. I have noticed I've got a dodgy seam. The wing seam is split open on me. See, can't get the staff. But we're going to leave it because obviously it's not about building a model. It's more about painting it. Tonight we're going to be looking at camo work. I'm going to just grab some Tamia paint I've got off the shelf. A couple of them are really nasty, so it'd be interesting to see about doing that. And we're going to talk about obviously putting camo work down, the ways of doing it and everything else like that. My trouble I've got is, I've got the sun is going to come slightly round it, sort of around this angle, and it's playing havoc because the camera hates it because it looks like I'm jaundiced now, and the overheads, quite frankly, I think they don't look very particularly nice either down in here. Do we have anything? Let's have a picture of an airbrush. And there's one camera, just checking the other. Right, okay. No, it was. I did have the sound switched off. That was my fault when I was playing with it earlier. I was trying to get it correct. There we go. That's all good. So hopefully my airbrushes work. I haven't actually picked up the airbrush since this time last week. So hopefully they're not bunged up. I did quickly just give them a blowout and they seemed absolutely fine. So we've got a couple of minutes to go. Let's have a quick drink. Apologies for there's no vlog up today. There is, but YouTube is sitting on it. Literally, YouTube is doing that thing for some stupid reason. It was up on YouTube at 5 o'clock. It's only a 25-minute one, and now it's sitting on it, and it's just in that horrible like 360 pixel rate, and it looks awful. So I haven't had a chance to put it up yet. So as soon as this is over, I will put it up on the main site, and away you can go. Basically, it's me saying that the site's done, everybody, and that you're about to be switched over to the new forum on 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so that's all it really is, but you can watch that after the show. But apologies for that there. Looks too pink. Right, okay, everyone's on form tonight. The Infinity looks pink too, and the paper has a pink tinge. Yeah, it's what it is the sun's just going down behind it. It should all slightly change in a second, and things should come back. See, look, I've lost it totally now. It's alright, it will come back. It's just that the blinds are closed, but I do have windows in here, and like the sun's just come back out again. So anyway, I'm not used to the sun. We're all going to go blind here. Right, there we go. We're up on time. 7 o'clock and we are live. Did the little countdown thing work? I haven't got it up on my computer. Hold on. Just making sure it has stopped. It should go black. Yes, it did. Hey, it worked. It goes black. Oh, it's slightly off when it's done, so that's fine. Right. Okay. Right, thank you there. That's it. Sound and video are good. That's good. That's good. 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 Right. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'll run the titles and we'll start this again. I might remember to edit this bit out, but you never know. Anyway, we'll see you in a second. Good evening, welcome to Flory Models Live. Here we are on Thursday the 15th, part 4 of our airbrushing live, which was pointed out to me, something I never actually thought about until yesterday when I was talking to a member and I was talking to Chris, and Chris said, aren't you worried about airbrushing live? Because let's face it, it always goes wrong and you're doing it live and you look like a right muppet when you're explaining to people. And I was saying that, well no, because I really want it to go wrong so I can show how to fix it. That's the whole point of it. And then I thought about it after having the conversation, think, yeah, you don't have to set yourself up some trouble really. You know, you can have a nice cushy life, record it, edit it, but no, we decide to do these things live. But that's pretty much what we do here. So, welcome everybody. We've actually going to be working on the lightning again. I have every intention of doing a primer coat over it and taking care of all the little bits and pieces, but to be honest, we're going to go straight on with it. I didn't have time to do it. We're going to be using Tamia paints. Now these paints I have grabbed off of the shelf. I haven't shaken them, I haven't done anything with them. The last time these particular colours were used was when I did the Spitfire, which was God knows when. I wasn't even in this house, so it's over 5 years ago now. So those paints are particularly thick. They've just been sat on the shelf. I thought that would be a good test for them and show how well we can mix paint, and hopefully it'll go well. The idea is we're going to give this technically a World War II camo. We're going to come in with a lighter underside and talk about that and putting that down, covering also darker colours, lighter colours and in-betweens to explain how that actually works. Then we're going to do the camo work on top. So we're going to come in with green and grey right over this one, and we're going to show the different ways of actually doing it, the simple ways. Yes, there's far more complicated ways out there, and I'm sure guys have got their own techniques as I do, but I'm going to show you the quick and simple way of doing it. And really, again, we're working on this sort of premise of having the air pressure, the paint and your distance all working together to give you very nice sort of freehand camo. So you're not in that situation where, you know, you've got big fuzzy areas and like overspray, or you've got that big, what I call the worm effect, where it's really wet, where you've tried to sharpen up and it's a thicker paint and doesn't look particularly nice and everything else like that. So from that point of view, hopefully we can just show you different ways of getting a simple camo, and then what we'll do in subsequent shows is basically move on with then elaborating on the techniques we've used by using different mediums and things like that. So welcome to everybody in the forum. I did shout out everybody in there, but we got quite a few in there tonight. I've got it on a slightly different thing in here. So down in there at the moment we've got Brian, Daniel, Harold, Jerome, Johan, Jonathan, Paul, Phil, Renee, Adam, Andy, Neil and Robbie. So good on you guys. Welcome for joining me today. Can I get that to move over a bit? I thought I did earlier. There we go. No, something like that. Okay, so I must admit I've got everything sort of pushed over here. So usual thing, any problems with video and sound, shout up in the chat room guys, and then I can deal with it as we make our way on with this one. So basically, as we can see, just down in here, hopefully these won't be pink as we pointed out earlier. Here is our lightning from last week. So this was obviously the Vallejo paint that we put down. Again, don't get me wrong, we do like Vallejo. It's very nice, but it takes its time to go off. And that's what we were talking about last week, of how over on this side, this is Tamia. I still think it's smoother and gives a nicer finish, but it goes off pretty much within sort of 5 minutes. This, to be honest, I think you've really got to give it an hour, preferably leave it overnight. Okay, on the underside where we did that one, I hope you've seen the photos. I did post some photos up after the show of showing close-ups of the dribble marks and the niceties, or nasties I should say, underneath here. And then obviously on this one, just as a recap, we actually used the AK interactive primer or microfiller primer on there, and then down on the back on this a little bit of black we got down on here, we went in and we used the actual Mr. Paint's black primer, which again is actually really nice, but it's not as quick as perhaps some of their other ones. If you're using their normal range of paints, they dry almost instantly, very, very quickly. This one took a little bit longer. I know I went in with a bit more heavy paint, but their primer does seem to take a little bit longer to dry than perhaps their normal paints do. But as I say, today we're going to look at using acrylics. We could just use MRPs, and to be honest, it would be a doddle because they're so thin, it's like spraying ink. It's no problem at all. You can put them on, they dry very, very quickly. Minimum air pressure, which means minimum distance, which means extremely sharp. But we want to do things, let's just say, the hard-ish way. So what we've got down here is our paint. So in exactly as we did before, we're going to make sure we make up good mixes. Now I have explained, and I can probably show you in here. Okay, this paint down here, as you can see, is a very old one. We haven't got lots of it in here, and it's pretty nasty. You can probably see how that's thinned out where it's just sitting on the top, and that's what we're saying. This paint probably hasn't been used in 5 years. Last time this did have an outing was with the Spitfire, Tamia Spitfire, so it's got to be sort of 5 years ago or something else like that. Okay, so from that point of view, you know, it's going to be a good test for this one of being quite nasty. So usual things, what I'm going to do is we're going to give them all a bit of a whiz to start with, just to get them all going. You can probably see down here on the map dry bits of paint from the outside, so you've got to imagine it's probably falling on the inside as well. Okay, so we're just giving this one a go first, purely so it can actually start doing its thing and it can start to separate and everything else like that. So these over here, again, another classic example of how old this paint is since I've used it. Okay, you can actually see it's pretty, see how clear it is? It's just like sludged down in there, it's completely separated this one. Alright, so we're just going to give this a quick whiz around, just dry the okay, let me drop this in here. And this is really thick. You can probably hear it. That's not having a good day in there. There we go. Tell how thick that was. It took a while to get that to mix. Me worried? No. Alright, maybe a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to give this, and what we're going to do is just start off with these two colours just to get them going. Okay, so, alright, and then let's bring this off. Okay, so we'll just pop the top on with that one as well. Okay, and then last up we've got this guy just down in here. And again, this one's looking pretty, needs a damn good mix. Okay. So again, you know, mixing your paint is just as much a part of spraying it, okay? Because if you haven't got a good mix, you're just going to have trouble all the way through this. Okay, so we just give that a damn good whiz in there. Okay, and before we come to spray, we will do it again as well. Okay, so we'll put that here. Okay, so pop the lid on. And there we go, we'll sort of be good to go. But just don't forget the steps we've already covered, because it's really easy to get complacent and think, right, okay, well, we just do this and off you go. And then you end up with spitting, stopping and starting, and it's because you just made a quick mix-up of paint. So you forget the steps you've done before, and again, that can come back and bite you because you start getting stopping and starting. You bung up these little bits we got down in here, of which there's now lots of. Okay, any one of those parts gets down to the business end of your airbrush, down between the nozzle and the needle, then you're pumping your trigger, you've got stopping, it's not flowing properly, you've got a funny pattern. It could be any number of reasons, purely because you've got a tiny crusty bit fell down inside. Okay, so again, it's always well worth spending another 5 minutes preparing your stuff before you go in and actually paint it, and then that way hopefully you'll have a far nicer spraying session than perhaps you'd have before. So we've got a light colour down on here. This is this Tamia Xf 80. All right, a different camera angle. Okay, so this one down here is just that normal light grey colour. What we're going to do, we're going to do the underside with this one. All right, so what we're going to do is unscrew this. We're just going to pop a little bit in here. Again, we're not going to need tons of it. We're hoping we're spraying lower air pressure, a lot closer, and everything else like that. We shouldn't have any problems like we've been having before. Okay, so for this I am going to use self-leveling thinners because I cheat. Okay, so it works well. So we're going to come in with about a 50-50 mix. Okay, just down on there. All right, and then we've got our brush here and we're just going to mix these up together. Okay, and again, exactly like with the paint, make sure your thinners is completely mixed with your paint, just as we've been doing it the previous weeks. Okay, because it's one of those things you think, oh, I've got the hang of it now, I know what I'm doing, and then you forget a real basic step. I am as guilty as the next person about doing things like this. Okay, so really nice mix down in there. So you're just popping it against the side of the cup. You can see it's it's thick, it's covering it. It's not like milk, it's probably a little bit thicker than milk. Okay, so that will be good. But again, I don't know what it is. To be honest, the weather here today is hot. You know, some of you know our deck area at the back, even in the shade, was showing 28 degrees this afternoon, and it really is hot. The brickwork on the side of the house gets very, very hot. In here, to be honest, I've got the doors open today, but normally I have the door shut. It gets really, really hot, and even now, I don't know what it is in here, but it's warmer than normal. All right, so usual thing, I'm just going to pop a little bit of thinners in here. and we're just going to blow it out. Okay, now what we're going to do is add our paint. So we're letting the paint sit just for around about, you know, a minute like that. That'll also help. Any of those big particles in there will go to the bottom. They're going to sink down because they're heavier, and it's not going to go to the business end of your airbrush. All right, so then slowly tip it in. Okay, keeping some of that paint back as we said before, and I'm going to use a clamp, and we're just going to pop it in with my holder. Let me just put that in there. So we're just going to pop a clamp in up here. Okay, so the underside, all we're going to do is put down an entire coat of paint. Okay, so again, we're listening to the airbrush. It sounds really, really high, and it sounds like it's not even struggling. Okay, so what we're going to do is back the air pressure off and then spray again. I don't know if you can hear it. There's like a deeper hissing sound. It means it's struggling just a little bit. So again, we're just going to up the air pressure a little bit. And there, you've lost that deeper hiss noise. So what it is, you're not actually hearing the paint coming through now. It's blowing through naturally, which means you should have a very nice flow. So what we're going to try and do is cover all three colours. So we've got white down there, we've got the grey, and we've got this brown. So what we're going to try and do is easily and quickly lay down colour over all three. All right. So again, starting somewhere where if everything goes wrong, it doesn't matter. So we're going to start on this wing area. All air, gently pulling back on the trigger. And because we're primed, we can actually build up quite a nice coat of paint quite quickly. Now this is our nasty side. So we know it's going to have some nasties down in here. We know it's going to have some run areas of various things because we put them in there, to be honest. Okay, so what we're going to do is just going to build up nice and slowly, adding and covering all in one. And you can see it doesn't take long to lose that brown. Okay, just on those wheel wells. Okay, now in here, like we spoke about before, the trouble you've got is you're going to get the vortex area. So you want to move in a little bit closer and be a little bit more positive with your paintwork. So pull the trigger and just a little bit more so it looks quite wet. Okay, and we'll build up that layer. I'm going to go back, I'm going to backfill. Okay, and because we've gone in there, you might see it looks quite wet. What it's going to do is it's going to melt all those bits in there together. Alright, so that's that one down there. So now what we're going to do is go over here, over the body, exactly as we did before. So we're treating this centre fuselage area. And then again, down on this side, a little bit heavier than we normally would do. Just so everything melts. Okay, and on here, we'll just speed this up now. Okay. So it's all nice and flowing. And you're happy that it's all joining together. I'm not going to do around the tail area because I've got plans for that if we've got time. Okay, up on here, and there we go. So we've used that 1 mil of paint and we've done all of that just down in there like that. Okay, so no problems there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit the extractor because when doing this amount of paintwork we will sort of fog up a bit. So we can show you down here on the close-up. Okay, this side's drying off really, really quickly. Okay, so this is drying. I don't know if it's dry to touch yet. I'm going to be horrible to try it, just about. Okay, and you can see down in here, we've got good coverage down in that join area. And as you make your way over, you can see we go wet for the newer stuff as it's been painted on there. And as it's going through, okay. But you can see automatically this is drying off, and if you wanted to, just come to air. You can turn your air pressure up on your airbrush if you want to. Okay, I'm just using cool air just to overcoat it, just to dry it all down a little bit. But you notice we didn't have any trouble, we haven't had any stopping, starting, spitting. It's a nice smooth paint coat, we've got no grittiness in the paint itself. Okay, and again, that's testament to the paint mix. It's nothing really to do with my paint spraying, it's really to do with the mix. It's a nice clean mix of paint. Okay, draw this down. Okay, have a good look down there. Really very, very nice indeed. No problems at all. No stops, starts, coughs, hisses, wheezes, anything whatsoever with that paintwork. Okay, so no problems there. Let's turn that off. So again, a really good start. So no problems with anything at all. The paintwork has been working well, the airbrush is working well. Everyone's a happy airbrusher at the end of the day. Usual thing though, if you do end up with problems, stopping, starting, everything, just take a few steps back, go through the motions and like working out what is exactly going wrong. We heard it originally when we were putting it down, it sounded like a deeper hissing noise. Okay, when you were just going for air, it was fine. When you pull back that trigger and introduce the paint, you could hear a deeper hissing. That was because the actual paint was being struggled to come out. So you've got a couple of options. You can think, well look, if it's going on and it's really struggling, it's going to need thinning, but it may be just a little bit more air. So a tiny little bit more air pressure cleared it through. It sounded great, no problem at all. If it continued to sound pretty rough, you know, your paint mix is probably a little bit thick, you might want to back off a little bit, okay? And then by backing it off, we mean just add a few more drops of thinners, mix it up, and away you go. Your options are, obviously you could add a few more drops directly to your actual colour cup and mix it up thoroughly, but you've always got this thing down the end. What I would suggest is tip that back in with your paint, your original batch you've made up, clean out your airbrush, you know your airbrush is good to go and it's working well, then add a few more drops to your original mix that thoroughly separate, introduce that into your paintbrush and spray that. That way you're not getting any old stuff in there, because sometimes you can get the old stuff will always collect down the bottom, especially if it's thick. All right, so again, it's just that little bit of forethought on exactly how you're going through the motions and how you're going to be doing it all. So if we just do a very quick colour change. So usual way, we're just going to put this in round the top, give it a good old wipe all the way round, and because we've done this really quickly you don't have to worry about it too much, but what I will do, you do that and then tip, dump it out, and then over here we've got some already, we can just give this a quick wipe all round the neck of it as well. We've got a little bit of spilt paint on there, and just keeping your airbrush and never forgetting to pinch clean the nozzle. Then we're just going to blow that through and then come back in just a tiny bit more, not tons of it, and then just blow it out full tilt. And again, just looking for what comes out last, no problems at all, we know we're good to go. All right, just as we were doing all last week. But at each stage, if you keep your airbrush clean, again, it's just that thing, you're not allowed for build-up. As soon as the build-up gets in there, you can have real problems. So really happy of how that's looking. We can let that dry off. We can work on the top. Okay, so usual thing when you're doing any type of camo work, you always work light to dark, just because it's easier to cover. Because obviously if you've got like a very light paint, especially light greys, and you're trying to go over a dark green, you've got to build up those layers to cover it up. So that way, if you start with the lightest color, so in our case the light grey, we then come in with the normal grey, and then we'll finish up with the green on top. You can then go back post and then resharpen up with the other grey, and it gives a nicer effect, I think. But the thing is, if you end up sort of going through the opposite direction, you've just got to keep covering up. And then sometimes if you made little errors and you want to cut in and change the shape of camo work, stuff like that we'll show in a moment, you're chasing that shadow because you're always going to have that darker shadow there. All right, so next one up is the grey. So we're not going to need tons of this, so we're just going to put a little bit of grey just down in here. Tell you what, we'll do the whole top and then we'll cut in, I think. So a little bit of grey paint, exactly as we've been doing right the way through this. So it's probably around about I don't know, 60% thinners to 50% paint. Sorry, 40% paint even. Just that way you're a little bit more than not. So I think we're going to need some more. Just grab some of those. Okay. A really good mix in here. Okay, and again you can look down at it, checking it, making sure it's all good. If you see anything floating in your paint, then stop. Okay, and try and either fish it out and see what's going in or start again. Okay, so again we're doing this thing where we're just checking to see how well it's covering. This has got pretty good coverage. When we move on with tight camo, whoops, that's what you get for looking at the camera at the same time, at the thing. Oh, now we're in the right mess. Okay, let me just dip this. That's what you get for cheap shot glasses. Okay. Okay, so quick question if you had to use Tamia X20A instead, would you have to do any different comparison? No, not at all. Use exactly the same amount of thinners no matter what it is. Self-leveling is just my one of choice. I just quite like using it. It works really, really well with Tamia and guns paints and all the rest of it. Last week I think we used extra thinners, we used X20A and stuff like that. It's just that I just like this stuff. It works really, really well. To be honest, it's probably working against me today because this stuff doesn't like it when it's really, really hot. It tends to dry too quick, where X20A's got a retarder in it which will slow down the drying time. You know, it's got to be a balmy sort of 27, 28 degrees near with everything on at the moment. It's quite warm, I must admit I am feeling it. What's the advantage of using self-leveling thinner? It's a hotter product. It basically works with the paint, breaks it down molecular, easier and faster. It's a hot product as in it's a lacquer. Okay, so from that point of view, if you're just adding normal ones which are alcohol based, that's a hot product, but it's not as hot as using a lacquer based ones. Okay, so from that point of view, it's easier to mix, it cleans it down. If you ever cleaned out your airbrush and you put X20A in there, then you put lacquer thinners, you'll know what I'm on about. Or using lacquer thinners and IPA, you'll know that lacquer thinners will eat through that stuff quicker. It actually breaks down paint, makes it a smoother mix and everything else. From a point of view of self-leveling thinners, this stuff apparently has got like a retarder in it, which allows it a drying time, as in it keeps it wetter on the surface longer, allows it to self-level down and then dries off. Okay, so that's the point of view with it. And as Paul points out, it does smell nicer, definitely. Okay, so in with the paint. I should switch over to a 5mm colour cut really, but there we go. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to cut around the top and talk about obviously avoiding stuff as we go through with this. All right, so actually if we have the wider lens, I think. Yeah, Tamia lacquer thinners, to be honest, is pretty much the same. It's just that lacquer thinners in the UK, which actually I think is like a buff colour, it's like a sort of, you know, a buff colour lid. It's very difficult to get hold of. Self-leveling thinners you can get pretty much anywhere, but other people's it does take a little bit longer to get it. So what we're going to do is we're going to work this right the way over the top of this grey as we've just done before. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut in freehand around the front end and things like that. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're thinking about overspray. So we're not going to spray it this way, obviously the direction of the airbrush, because you're going to cover the body. So what you're trying to do when you're doing this type of work is always spraying neutrally, either straight down or slightly off. Okay, so I don't like to spray 90 degrees down all the time. I tend to spray slightly to the side because that allows the sort of air to escape and it stops you getting overspray and things like that. Okay, so when you're coming in like this, all right, we are way too much air, so okay, so listening to the airbrush, no growling or anything else like that, so we're quite happy. So we're going to come in and we're just going to pop this right the way over. Okay, so we're just going to pick out that part of the wing, and you can see it's nice, bigger, confidence building stripes of colour going down now. Okay, we've got good confidence, we know the paint's flowing well and everything else like that. Okay, so that's the thing with it. When the confidence builds, you're good to go. Now what you don't want to do is come in and spray that leading edge here in this way, because otherwise you're going to spray the tail. Alright, so what we want to do is come in neutrally, so around about 90 degrees straight down. because what's going to happen is you are going to get overspray, but it's only going to go probably about halfway up the wing and not right the way over absolutely everything. Also, as you might notice, we haven't got any overspray onto the other side. It will give you a neutral look. So the other thing you can do is just come in around about 45 degrees to the leading edge, okay, and then just lightly put a coat on. That way you'll coat the top edge, but you will never go onto the underside. So you don't have to mask up a wing. I know a lot of people would mask up that wing to paint it, but you can see underneath we've got nothing under there whatsoever, yet the top is totally covered. Okay, so when we come into this area, again, this nice little right angle up here, which could cause trouble, what we're going to do is get nice and close, gently increase the pressure, and we're going to flood it. So we want it to look wet. Okay, and we're going to come up, and we're going to cover that entire area. Again, very nice and positive with it. We're not messing around. You're putting down a good layer of paint. If you're going to go in with dusty little air and you're not sure, you're going to get texture and it's going to be rough and a bit nasty in there. Okay, so off of here, because obviously we've got the front end and we want to go 90 degrees, we can't spray this front edge here because otherwise it's going to come down the front. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut off the front edge and come through. So what we're going to do is literally come along, happy with the paint flow, and then we're just going to put a line, okay, and then we're going to walk it back up, going upwards. So that same small line, but we're just increasing it. Okay, so then that way we get a sort of faded line, but it's not going to go any lower. Then once you've got a bit on there, you can come in from the top of it, okay, and then just up here, and again, just along here, and we can complete that area. All right, now this leading edge of the wing, just this here, if you want to be clever and try and get in and do it quite sharp, let me just change that one. Okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to try and walk it along the actual wingtip itself, but this is the area we're talking about, this bit here, because if I spray it, we're going to get a big line down the front. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is come in just from the top. We can just about see the paint, and we're just feathering it off the edge, and as you can see, we've got none down on this front corner. So again, it's knowing how far you can go. So the overspray is actually painting for you. All right, so once you've got that down and you're all happy, okay, then a couple of things you can do. If you had a spare hand or something to wedge this on, of which I don't, let me just grab this, we might be able to. You can actually then, I can get this on here to sit somewhat. Okay, something like that. Okay, so what you can do is both hands on this one, if I show you this way, you can call it the double grip, as I call it. Okay, you're taking all that weight off the airbrush onto this hand here. So I've got my elbow pressed up against the table. Okay, I'm not probably going to have it on this because it might move everything, but it's all in there. Okay, and my arm goes on it. It's nice, it's relaxed, you relax through the shoulder, and all we're going to do is just going to come in and put in a sharper line so we can get nice and close, hardly using any paint. You can just about see the paint coming through, and what we're going to do is just going to walk it along. And again, we've got confidence in the airbrush, we've got confidence in the paint. It's not going to slop and spit because we've mixed it nicely, and we end up with a very nice edge running right the way through. Okay, and again, on that top area, we've got no frosting or grittiness or anything else like that. Okay, so it is that thing of just knowing it, understanding it, but to be honest, the bit where your paint starts to work for you instead of against you, so the paint's running really well through this airbrush, you feel like, oh, I could go off and do everything with it. It's a confidence booster, but again, it's all to do with mix and ratios. Okay, listening to that airbrush is more important than what percentages things are. I have no idea what air pressure I'm actually spraying at tonight, and as for mixing, as you can see, it's just a bit, and at the moment I'm just finding the sweet spot by adjusting the air. Later on, when we do tighter camo, I might need to then up the game a bit and add bits of thinner just to get it so it's all flowing for me, but actually it's working really well, so I don't have a problem per se as it is doing it at the moment. So over on this side, if we just grab another sheet of this or two, because I don't really want to put grey paint down on here, we're just going to show a little bit on the wing. Okay, so again, what we're going to try and do is cut up against the top of this wing, okay, without actually spraying the wing itself. So again, knocking back the air pressure so we can get nice and close, Okay, you might see we've got some little bit of fading up the top there, so we're just going to come in. Okay, and we're just going to knock that off. Okay, do a little bit up there, and we're just going in. And to be honest, we're just doing tiny, tiny little areas. Okay. And there we go. You see, we haven't actually painted the wing, but we've taken off all the overspray around it. Got a slight shadowing down on there, but nothing you'd worry about, okay? But then if we wanted to, we could come in, and if we showed like a basic camo one on here. So for instance, what we're going to do is, when you're like, you know, you're still practicing with your camos and you're not too sure where you're going to go, don't forget, you can adjust it and go back and take a bit off, add a bit to whatever camo pattern you want to do. And in some ways it's really nice because you can actually add depth. Okay, so i.e. you've got some areas going to be darker, some areas going to be lighter, all right? So if you're first all working on a camo, put down a basic area where you want it to be. Then after that, you can then cut into it and add to it, which is what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do now, just for this wing here, we do green on the other one. I'm going to try and keep a couple of brown lines coming in here on this wing, and up here we're going to just try and chase this off so it's grey up here. So because we want to keep this brown, we're always going to be spraying away from it, okay? So what we're going to do is we'll check our flow. It's a little bit high air pressure because we're trying to cut in. So we're just going to take it down just a notch. A little bit high, it's still spraying fine. A little bit more, that's pretty good, okay? So what we're going to do, we are going to spray towards the fuselage, not this way. And we're just going to put in a line, okay, just as a little bit of a camo line, okay? So we're just going to pop that in like that. And then what we're going to do is lightly backfill the inside. Okay, so just lightly coming in. Okay, for the minute. Alright, something's cutting in and out. One of the USBs, many USBs, hopefully we're all still here. Okay. Okay, so the thing is, that's pretty much a rubbish pattern. We want to improve that a little bit if we can, okay? So from my point of view, what we're going to do is, we're just going to put some little domes. So we're going to cut inwards from this direction, okay? So we're going to spray in here, okay? And what we're going to do is, we're actually going to pull outwards in a curve. So if I do one to show, okay? So you might see it's just there. So we're just adding to that little curve, and I'm going to walk it outwards. Okay, and then we're just going to come in, so you can see how we've got it there, and then perhaps you think, oh, I don't like that one either, so what we're going to do, we're just going to take a little corner off. Okay, again, we've got great confidence in the paint, so we've just put that little swoosh into it like that. Okay, so there we go, that's looking pretty good, happy with that. No real overspray to it either, but it's a little bit faded, but we can sharpen that up afterwards. So what we're going to do is do the other side now. So again, we're shooting away from this wing and we're putting it that way now, okay? So you don't want to be spraying downwards or towards this way, otherwise you're going to make it very grey inside. Okay, so what we're going to do is somewhat follow that pattern as we did before. So to start with, we're thinking, well, I don't know, we'll probably have something along like this. Okay, so we just put in one in, and we don't want to do the entire wing, so I'll tell you what, we're just going to come up and we'll make a little line, something like that. Okay, so that's our area. So now we want to spray inside that and nowhere else. So what we're going to do is start with, we're going to backfill this half, then we'll backfill from this way. So then that way you're getting minimal overspray in both directions. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to cheat and we're going to go down the middle. Okay, so again, from this point of view, we're going to spray it slightly this way and away from these edges, but I need to cut in on this side first. Okay, so we can just do this leading edge. Okay, and then we're just going to bring this in and down. Okay, and then backfill, so we can do little circles, but we're spraying inwards, not outwards, okay? And that's about as far as we want to go. Okay, so then we can turn it this way. Okay, and then use things around you to prop it up so it's easier, so you can see it and everything else like that. Okay, so then we can come in here and we're just going to backfill. Again, shooting inwards, and then we're just doing little round movements to fill in. Okay, and then changing that pattern again. Something like that maybe, and then I don't know, perhaps we'll change that outer one a little bit later on, but there we go. But we've got minimal sort of overspray running into the inside. Okay, again, it's just that way of doing it, depending on which way you want to go through the motions of it. Okay, but it is that thing of learning it to shoot inwards and never outwards, and also you don't really want to be shooting straight down, because again, think of it like a splash pattern. All right, if you're coming in, you've got this cone coming off, so if you're shooting downwards, it's going to hit it and then you have a splash, so that way you're going to get overspray in every single direction. So what you want to do is a maximum of sort of 45 degrees, but anything sort of, you know, shallower is better, because you're doing that thing is obviously you've got this cone, and if you can cut the bottom area off, it just makes it easier. But just watch where that top half's going. So if it's off there spraying off into infinity, you're going to be covering everything else. The amount of times I spray things and you go, oh, spray this, and then you look down and you've got it overspray over another part. You know, it may be something completely different. It might be a wing or down the back end of a fuselage. It's not a mass problem, it's overspray. Easiest way, spray over it with the original colour and get rid of it. But it is a pain, so if you can avoid it, it is better. But hopefully, we have a look down here. Come on camera, play ball. You can see we got some nice markings going down on there. They're pretty sharp, no problem at all, but also you can see the paint on the other side. It's nice, clean, it's not lumpy, there's no runs in it or anything else like that. Okay, so it's given a very nice finish to all of that one. Okay, so next up, coming in with the different colours on top. Okay, so from our point of view, what you can do is that we can come in now and sort of, you know, using the same type of effect as we've done there, you can then add more colours to it. So all you're going to be doing then is overlapping and going through the motions. But there is a few different things you can do easier. One of them is to mask up with things like worm tacks. I know it sounds old, and there is other things, there's putties and all this new flash stuff, but in the day it was blue tack. Blue tack, the drawback to it is it's got oils in it. It was fine for when we all used enamels, but the thing is when everyone switched over to acrylics, acrylics tend to absorb the oils, so then you can end up with, it looks like a worm mark or a slug's gone across your work or something else like that, and it does leave oil. But if you use white tack, these are oil free ones, you'll be good to go and do it that way. So literally what we're going to do is we'll just clean out our airbrush, load up the green, and we'll show you the different ways of doing worm tack ones, and then obviously we'll show the same on that one with using it in freehand. So what we'll do, because we're tight, I will tip back my paint, which is something I do. People often say to me, oh, what about the colour change, and obviously you've changed the ratio and the thinners and all the rest of it. Again, I stand by what I always say, I'm going to atomize the bloody stuff, it's not going to affect it. Okay, and as for it sort of you're getting thinner with every time you do this, yeah, I can get that, but again, I tend to know what it's doing, and every time you open a bottle of paint it just slightly dries out. So from that point of view I think you're fine. The only thing I would recommend is stick to one thinner. Don't put into it IPA, then a little bit of self-leveling thinners, and then something like, you know, an acrylic thinner, because that way you're going to affect it and it's not going to like it. But if you do stick to one brand, like I tend to stick to self-leveling thinners all the time, really you shouldn't have a problem with it. Okay, so we'll just give this a quick change, and then so far we're doing pretty good here. We've got 100% success rate of no spitting, stopping or starting with very, very old paints, which I must admit, when I thought about it, I was going to cheat and I was going to use a brand new bottle of each, but then I thought, nope, that's not what we do. No, I'll be honest with you, I haven't got any actually more paint to switch. Okay, so the other thing as well, I haven't used these airbrushes since last week at all, and as I say, it's really hot, really, really hot in here today, never a problem, you know. So again, it's testament to just keeping it all going, clean, nozzle. And also this, you know, you'll often see me, well you probably won't normally, but you'll see me do this a lot, of always going around cleaning my airbrush. I just give it a rub round, it just stops paint building up, because again, any of these bits of paint get into the business end of your airbrush, it's a chore, because you're just trying to get it all out again and going through the motions. Alright, so from that point of view, clean airbrush, clean paint job. Okay, so that's those two done. let's have these. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Bill, could you please make a mistake and show how to make a correction? Right, I will do on this one then. Thanks for that, Robbie. You've just given me an out. When this goes horrendously wrong, I can say, that's a mistake, let's put it right. You wait, this paint is bound to bite on me at some point. But if you've got any questions, shout now, and I'll try and answer you live. I haven't been in the forum or anything. Okay. The other thing as well, when you're tipping your paint, it's personal choice. I know people, they say, oh, tipping your paint, you waste a bit down the neck and all the rest of it. My point is, if you suck it out with a pipette, you're never going to get it back. So, long as it's short. Okay. The other thing as well, though, do not scrape the edge of the pot on your edge, because what can happen is those dry, crusty bits fall in. So again, it's just a little bit of forethought. Let's work out what's going on and everything else like that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make this a bit thick deliberately. And then we'll show you the difference in the pattern. Okay. To be honest, I'm amazed this is working as well as it is tonight, because I say it's hot in here. I must admit I am melting. Okay. So like that. Okay. So now this I know is a little bit thick. It's not too thick, but it is just a little bit thick than what we would want. All right. So when we come down to spraying it, okay. Don't know if you can hear it. When I introduce the paint, the pitch changes. Instead of it being, we get. Can you hear that? I don't know if we hear it. You need better camera, sound thing into here, but you can actually hear it, and that's because the paint is too thick. Now, obviously, we can up the air pressure. All right. Still, to be honest, it's still thick. I can still hear it. Trouble is now, the air pressure is so high, when we actually go to spray our model, we're going to get a very fuzzy edge. Now, and this all keep up at the back, because this does make slight sense. Do you remember when we were messing around doing all this rubbish, which you all thought, oh, he's off his head? Okay, and he doesn't know what he's on about, and we were talking about finding the sweet spot with your pattern. Okay, so when we were back a couple of episodes ago and we were talking about getting the canal, if you get the canal recap, it means it's like lighter in the middle, it's been pushed up the edges, it's too much air pressure, and obviously if you've got too much air pressure, it was really fuzzy, and I think it was Sod's Law is the one we cleaned off, look. Okay, but some of it is still here, and we did the squiggly lines and going through, and we were looking for the sweet spot. Okay, we needed that unicorn sort of area where we were getting good air pressure, good airflow at a good distance, so we have maximum coverage, minimum overspray, okay, but we didn't get this big black line, because technically this black line is perfect for what we want to do. The trouble is though, it's too much, it's too heavy, because what's happened is you've got a trench running in. It's just where the air is hitting down and pushing up the edges, so we end up what I call the canal. So what you're looking for is that sort of sweet spot in amongst these, which technically will be, this one here is a little bit sort of fuzzy, it's just a little bit too light on the edges. It was this one just in here, which is a sort of Goldilocks one, the one we like. So that way it's just that perfect mix of all three. So it's distance, air pressure and mixture. Okay, so when they all work together, you end up with something really nice. What we're going to get here is something like this guy in the middle, because the paint's a little bit thick, it's having a hard time to atomize it. We need to up the air pressure a little bit, so either it's going to come out really speckly, or it's going to look very blurred edge when we try and just repeat what we were doing before. So, okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to pop this in here. We just do this lower part of the wing. Okay, so same thing again. What we're going to do is we're just going to do this bit here. Then what we do some masking elsewhere, all right, when we come in for that one. So we're going to just do down. So what we're going to do, you might hear it already. As soon as you hit the plastic, you hear that? It's really loud. It's too much air. You know, all the little warning signs are shouting at me to actually say, look, stop, this isn't going to work. You know, not only does it sound bad, it's crackling. It's not really atomizing particularly well. But also, when we get near the plastic, that's going to be horrendous all over this, but we'll carry on just to show you, okay? So from that point of view, you're like, right, okay. Here we go. So what we're going to do is come in, and you might notice it straight away how big that line is and how horrible it is, okay? But we'll just carry it through. all right? But straight away, can you see how fuzzy and how all over the place that actually is compared to what we had on the other side? It's just too much. It's literally everything is too much. So what we need to do now is turn down that air pressure. Okay, so we're just going to take down the air pressure a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to step in front. See, automatically you can see we've stepped down in front. But again, if you look at the edge, it's really, really faded. And what it is, it's having trouble atomizing it, and it's actually quite gritty and spitty, instead of it having that nice line that comes down there and gives us a really nice finish. Okay, so that is the trouble we're having now, is just trying to get it all in there to sort of flow and come back right. Now you could carry on with it, you know, like this, and say, right, okay, I'm happy. But if you just look at the edge of it, you can see it's just too fuzzy. Okay, and that is it. It's just that thing, too much paint, it's too thick, the airbrush is struggling, it's, you know, the air pressure required to make this work gives us this big line at the back, which is just too much. Okay, and if we don't have enough down there, it's just speckling. It's not even atomizing really, it's speckling there at the back. Okay, so what we need to do is thin it out just a little bit, just to get the paint working for us. So again, I'm going to shoot my losses, we'll just tip that back. Okay, we need to clean out the airbrush as well, because otherwise, you know, you're just starting off bad and it just gets worse as time goes on with your mix. Okay, so we just clean that right out. It doesn't need to have a full deep clean, because quite frankly you've already had it once, and all we're going to do is just dump that straight in there. Okay. Okay, quick clean round, quick wipe round. Okay, and then what we're going to do, just reset. And then what we're going to do, just going to add a little bit more thinners into this. Probably too much thinners now, to be honest, I think it slipped a bit. Okay, really good mix. Because you've got the stuff that you've tipped back in here as well to what was sitting there, probably separating and everything else. So make sure you get right to the bottom. Really good mix right the way around this one. Okay, so we're happy there's nothing left in the airbrush. What I'm going to do, slowly, going to let it stand just for a second. Again, we're just waiting for any large lumps to fall down the back. Okay, and then we can just add some paint. Okay, so straight away that's the same air pressure as we had before, and you might hear it's got no difference. So it doesn't matter if I'm air or paint, there is no difference at all from the sound of it. So again, listening to your paint work. So literally it's that thin now that it doesn't matter if it's shooting air or paint. At that pressure, it's very, very happy to continue. Okay, and you can probably hear it's very, very low. Okay, so again, we're just going to back it off just a little bit. Okay, check our flow, and we are happy. Again, probably knock off the air pressure just a little bit more. Okay, and then what we can do, we can come in and we can repeat. So what we do, I'll tell you what, we'll go this way, because obviously we're going to end up painting the model. Okay, so again, we're just going to come in here, and then straight away you can see we've got what I would call a better one. You see the back, it's really heavy. That middle one we went a few times, but this has got quite a nice solid look to it. Okay, and then once you're in there like that, what we can do, we can just blend and backfill to what we had before. And to be honest, I've got terrible glare on this, I can't see it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is angle down, so I'm shooting from above down at around about 45 degrees. And all we're doing is backfilling, jogging the airbrush up and down, just blending it in. And what we'll do is we'll just do a little line just down in here, and then going back the other way. Okay, and then we just take it up that way. We'll leave that tip free. Okay, so again, I've just knocked the valve. Where were we? Okay. Circle motions just to blend very lightly, and then Okay, and this guy down in here. And then that way we end up with something like we were after before. Okay. So again, it's just one of those things that if things go wrong, you just adjust it. You make your decision on how you're doing, how it's going down. If it's not really working for you, or you're in a situation where it's starting to run away from you, i.e. it's looking a little bit wet, it's going to get a run in a minute, I'm going to end up with those canal things that Flory's on about and all the rest of it. Just take a breather, take a step back. Right, okay. Work the problem, dry it down with what you got. So just go all air, no paint, just air. Dry it right the way down, just over it, get it going, and then just dust over the top of it again just to blend it in, and you'll be absolutely fine. So worm tack way, which is basic, that's, it's the oldest thing in modelling history, I think. Okay, really, really simple. I say the oil-free ones are probably the best. You just literally take a lump, roll it up into a sausage, which gives you great, build, because you can bend it, then you can put it round corners, you can get it to conform, complex little shapes. If you've got trouble, especially on here, because obviously to try and get these areas to get them without any fade and stuff like that. Secret, warm this stuff up, get it as hot as possible. That's right, Robbie, no problem. That's what I'm here for, is the little light bulb moments. People go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but if you warm up this stuff as well, it becomes so sort of, malleable. It's so pliable. You can poke it into corners and stuff like that. It's amazing stuff, okay? So just warm this one up. When it gets really warm, you'll know about it because it just, bends and everything else like that really easily. And then what you can do, you can take it, sausage, size-wise, depending on the scale, okay? If you're doing something like this 70-second, you probably want it to be about 1/2 centimetre. Okay, you sort of need it around about this sort of size. Okay, and then that way you're not going to have too much of a what I call a shadow edge, the curve on it. Alright, so what you want to do is start somewhere where you obviously want to start. So for instance, we're going to start it around about here. Bearing in mind, I'm doing the grey side along the inside. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're going to pull this up and then we're just going to stick it here. Okay, so then once it's in, what you can actually do is just manipulate it with your finger. So you just lightly start to push it around. Okay, this guy in the corner, what you want to do is just lift it back, poke it down into the corner and then up. Okay, and actually this stuff, the thing is you can actually keep pulling it around. Okay, and then all you're going to do is just lightly flatten it. So what you want it to do is have a curve. Okay, but you might notice down here, this has got a really big curve. So what you're going to do is just pull it backwards, so go that way a little bit, okay? And then nudge it down again, nudge down those areas, everything else. And then what you can do if you wanted to put in interesting shapes, you might notice if I go back to when I did my SU25, the leaf pattern, what you can actually do, if you want to do weirdo things like that, which we can show here, if you put something like this down, then what you can do is come along with your brush, and you can actually poke this stuff about to make really sharp indentations into it and to give you quite an odd type patterns and things like that. This is what we call leaf pattern. You can make leaf shapes out of it, which actually we'll show you. Okay, you can just poke it all around like this and get really some quite interesting stuff, and then you can pull it backwards and again up here, and then you can just dot your finger down. Okay, now obviously you do have to worry about overspray up the back end, so you could use masking tape or just stretch this stuff out and use itself. It's totally reusable, so you can come back and use this time and time again. Okay, so we'll just stick that there. Okay, and we'll just try and pull this around the corner a little bit if we can. Almost. So well, let's get rid of this thing, let's do it my head in. There we go. And then we just grab a little bit in here. That bit goes over there. We've made a bit of a mess here. Okay. Place that one down on there. Okay, so then what we're going to do, we'll take our paint. Okay, same air pressure as you had before. Okay, and what we're going to do is lightly dust it, but this time we're going to shoot 90 degrees onto it. Okay, so think about that splash, and that's what we're saying about masking up with this. You don't want to be masking up anywhere that you know needs to be protected. Okay, so get in there, mask it all up. So down in here we've got this real ragged, tagged mask thing. So all we're doing is coming down, and we're just going to lightly 45 degrees to this at all times. Just going to go over, and we're looking for it to go no more than a satin finish. As soon as we get more than a satin look on this, cut to air only and dry it back, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to get bleed, and bleed's going to run underneath. Okay, so my air pressure for some reason, which is in trouble with my Mac valve, the lever's really loose and it needs updating, I think. Okay, so we're just going to take a line to here. Okay, so we go all over like that, and we'll dry that down. So we're just cutting to air to dry it off. Now normally again you would wait a good half an hour before pulling this stuff off, so it's just got time to dry, but I'm cutting to air, we're just drying down. Okay, so we're happy with it in theory, or hopefully, and then that way when we come along we can pull it off and you can get the line going down in there, which gives you, as I say, that's my sort of effect of a leaf pattern type thing, but you get the general idea. And then if we just show you on the other side, just as a bit of a thing, if you wanted a curve, for instance, again, warming this stuff up, it just makes it so much easier. If it's cold, it doesn't stick properly. And again, you can see it in here. Don't worry about that. This stuff's years old. I hate to think how old this stuff is. Okay. So what we're going to do, we just come back in here, and then just for argument's sake, I need to get a bit thinner. Okay, we're just going to grab this. Just going to come around like this, and again, depending on the thickness of the tack worm, this is quite a thick one, so it's going to have a more of a softer edge. The thinner the tack worm has, okay, the sharper it will be. Okay, so that's the reason for that. We're going to fold him up there. Okay, so we're going to take our paint, and again, we're shooting 45 degrees. Sorry, 90 degrees even. So we're just backfilling that area we had for a moment. Okay, and then right over. Okay, just trying to backfill, to be honest, to blend those two together. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just going to bring this up. And again, always keeping that same type of angle that you're spraying at as you were before. Okay, and then again, we're just going to try and cut this guy off. Just try and blend these two. Cut to air, just drying it back. And again, if you were really good, you wouldn't take this off straight away, but okay. And then that gives you your more perhaps traditional camo line. As you can see, you can end up with something pretty much sharp, but not as sharp as obviously you were doing down in freehand and all the rest of it, but you can give yourself a very nice camo effect right the way over. But depending obviously on how thick your worm is will depend on how soft it is, because if it's a really thick worm, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a very soft line. The smaller he is, the sharper it gets, until you're down to basically you might as well just use masking tape and do it that way. Okay, so there we go. I hope that sort of helps out with that one. All right, any questions down there in the chat? Are you all still with me? We still on air? Hopefully. Okay, so there we go, that one does that. So if you wanted to get in to sharpen things up and you're happy of how things are going and all the rest of it, so like down here it's a little bit soft, okay, what we're going to do is just going to get right in there and do quite small little passes. So air pressure right down, okay, jam this under here to stop him rollicking around, and what we're going to do is just come this side of it and we're just going to sharpen this up. Okay, so you can actually sharpen it by just popping down that edge. But the thing is, you've got a little tide mark. Now that might go. If not, what you want to do is just backfill that just a little bit, okay, just to get that to come through. All right, so if we just do this side. Okay. Are we all still okay in the chat room, guys? Give us a thumbs up if you're still alive in there. I'll take it you are, and I'll carry on anyway. It's saying we're live and we're all good and everything else like that, so I'm hoping we're all okay. Let me just check down in here. Yeah, well, you're all still watching, so that's always a good sign. Okay, so just down in here, we're just going to sharpen this little guy up down here. So again, nice and sharp, nice and close, low air pressure, and then just back the other way, and we can back off with it. Okay, so there's those difference. Thank you. That's all right. Everyone went quiet in the chat room. I was thinking, and the thing is, I had the little noise going. Doo-doom. I thought, that's it. I've lost you all. So there we go. Any questions? Does that make sense with you guys? Hopefully that's a little bit of a thing. Again, a lot of people often say to me, "Oh, I have trouble doing tight camo work and getting right in there." Again, listening to your airbrush, it will tell you everything's going on. That first one we did, you could just hear it. It was just struggling a little bit, okay? So again, but it's by thinning it just that little bit more, it eases the flow rate. It's less stress on the needle, which means technically you get a smoother pattern, all right? So from that point of view, when you're actually using it and you're spraying it down and everything else like that, there's no reason why it just doesn't carry on indefinitely, because it's got clearing. The needle's physically clearing itself all the time. Sometimes when you get build up on the needle when it's drying, that's where you're a little bit stop and starty and stuff like that. Again, bad mix. Bad, you know, mix means everything to this, especially when you're starting to get down to tight work like this and you're moving a little bit closer. All right, so again, listening to it, forget air pressures, forget mixes, listen to your airbrush. It will tell you exactly what's going on. Okay, if you're in that situation, you're putting it down and it's hissing and it sounds great, but you've got the canal thing where it's looking wet, again, back it off a little bit, thicken up the paint a little bit more, add a little bit more body to the paint, and then that way try it again. But always dump your color cup. Don't fight with it. Don't start adding into the color cup, because I tell you now, you'll be chasing the dragon with it, literally, because you're looking for that mystical mix in there, and sometimes it's just easier to dump it, clean out your airbrush. You know your airbrush is working fine, then it's nice and clean. Mix up a new one in your color cup, reintroduce that into your airbrush and see how you go, and you'll be amazed how many times that fixes a problem. Yet the amount of times I've gone through and thought, oh, a few more drops in there. No, it's still playing up. I'm still pumping the trigger. I'm still having to blow out every 5 minutes. Again, it's all down to mixture. Yeah, if you get the mixture right, you're absolutely fine. And mixtures, again, it's that thing. 60%, it should be milk, it should be this, rubbish. Listen to your airbrush, it will tell you everything you need to know. And to be honest, it is hot, I mean really hot in here, and I'm not having any problems at all. Yeah, to be honest, I thought I might do, and I might need the retarders and things like that, but still everything's working really, really well, so you don't need to do it. Thank you, Paul, no problem at all. Everyone's good in there. We all enjoying it? Scream if you want to go faster. Right, okay, so from that point of view, that is the basics of doing camo. There is little things you can do. Obviously, we've spoken about it before. Clever putty, don't buy pounds of putty. Clever putty, it's like quarter of the price. My only drawback to this stuff is, one is I play with it more than I use the stuff. Secondly, it's getting it out the tin is like, you know, you need a degree, okay? And third, it's more fun playing with this stuff than it is actually using it, because I know, yeah, we've done this millions of times, but I love this stuff because it's bouncy. What you can do, you can take a bit, which is great, and you're thinking, right, this stuff is a miracle for everything, okay? So you get it and you roll it up. And to be honest, you can go back and see the Hunter build. Sorry, the which one was it actually? He says, rapidly looking through all his stuff. Hurricane. There it is, the Hurricane build. We used it extensively all the way through. What I love about this stuff is that you put it on, it grips really, really well, and it's quite strong, all right? The only thing is, if it sticks to itself, it never comes apart, because it sort of melts and all the rest of it. The other thing as well is that you put it down to the right curve on the edges, and you think, that's good, perfect, I'm gonna spray it. the phone rings, you go off somewhere else like that. This stuff over time, as we know, because if you make a tower out of this, as we've done before, if you make a turd out of it, it goes down. It will soften up, and by the end of the show, that will be a puddle on the floor. It does the same on the wing of the plane. So what happens is it sits there really nice, but right now that's in there, it's doing this. So actually it's not going to be where you thought it was, because it's going to self-level. And I've often wondered, if I left it overnight, if you came out in the morning, would it be like a puddle on top of it? I assume it probably would be, because of the way it goes, but I've never tried it. It's really nice stuff for a quick fix. If you're doing a job and you know you're going to be done, then absolutely, this stuff's absolutely great, because it grips really, really well. It stays on there nicely. It doesn't mark your model either, which was my concern to this stuff, because it looks like it's just about to release oil. It doesn't seem to, or definitely doesn't seem to with anything I use. So from that point of view, it's actually quite nice stuff. But if you're in that thing like I am a lot of the time, I might be doing it, I might have this on my model for even a couple of days. So I know I can go away, I can leave this on here and we won't have a problem at all. Okay, so from that point of view, that's why I like this stuff over that stuff. But everybody has their personal choices for it. But again, clever putty, not panzer putty, because you'll pay a fortune for it. Right, any comments about using masking fluids? Buster, hold on. God, it's hot in here. Welcome back. I'm actually soaked, my t-shirt's wet. You might notice this. Buster had it on the tail. This was Micro Sol R, which is the proper one, because you can cut this one with a knife. Yes, it does work. It's just not as nice as putting him down. The theory is right there. Absolutely, I totally agree. Because what you could do is, you know, let's face it, camo with a hairy stick is a doddle. All right. So you think, right, take that, brush it on, and away you go. But it just doesn't seem to work like that. It doesn't seem to give a smooth edge. It's not thick enough to be able to give a nice edge, because the thing is, it's almost pulling itself in and all the rest of it. The other thing you could do with this is paint it on and then cut it with a knife, but then you're going to end up with a cut mark in your model and everything else like that. I don't know, there's something also about using tack worms or freehand which has a more organic feel to it. It tends to give it a more worn look. If you wanted to do something like a desert camo, they bleach out, they fade the edges, that way it gives it an absolutely fantastic finish and stuff like that. Have you seen this thing melting? That's what I mean. Okay, the other thing as well, when you look down on here, the difference is we've got down on here, you've got, obviously this one we did with the torn leaf has sort of got a slight little edge to it. This guy over here has got a nice little edge to it as well. Over here they've got a little bit more faded. You know, on this type of scale, probably not going to get away with it. You might want to go down with something like this and go with this type of pattern on it. Whereas down on here, that works really, really well on anything 48th or certainly bigger. So when you look at other things I've done camo-wise, like, I can get it without breaking them all. Okay, so when we came down and we were working with this chap, you might remember when we did this one and we were putting the camo work in, to me it worked really, really well. If I have a wider camo, you get it all in. Doing something like this is really nice because it enables you to soften the edges, which in my eye gives it a little bit more realism and makes it look a little bit more lifelike than what it would be to go in there and do it actually with a hard edge. Because if you do a hard edge, it just takes it back to looking like die cast or like plastics and various things like that. So from my point of view, I like to use more of a freehand effect with it. Not only am I lazy and I can't be bothered to mask up and everything that goes with it, but I sometimes just feel it gives you more of a creative license, and you can go around it and you can put it in, and if you're not happy you can change it. And when we did this one, to be honest, I don't know, yeah, it was this side, the colour callouts are incorrect, so I had to go back and respray it, but it wasn't a problem because you just go around and do it by hand. Yet if you had to mask up to respray it, you've got to get the lines to all join up and be in the right place again and everything else like that. But it's just that thing as well. I think it's just personal choice, a little bit more creativity with it. I just quite like the effect that it gives, just that type of edge. But again, this is on something on 48, I think it works quite well. As soon as you get a little bit lower, if I was to do the same model perhaps in something like a 72nd, then maybe I'll be reaching for the tapeworms or something else like that. Okay, Does it also work good on AFVs? I presume you mean like 1/3, 1/35 scale. Yeah, that's what I do. Exactly the same thing. If you're doing something like a NATO camo Euro 1, you know, so sort of like the NATO, what are they in Tamia land? I can't remember what they are now. What are they? 86, 87 and 88, 68 is it, I think, for the NATO colours. To give it that edge of being warm, then I would do it by freehand. But again, if you wanted it to look more new, then you could go in with the tack worms and something else like that. And again, something like using Mr. Melting down here, as you can see, is now completely going to blob. You know, that works quite well, but just worried about your stowage items, your photo etch, things like that from being pulled off and pinged off. Again, speed sometimes is quite nice. The other thing as well, if you are doing armour and you've got this thing with a lot of stowage on board, if you're using the tack worm thing, don't think you have to go in there pressing them in the corners, because naturally most armour is sprayed, kitted up as well, and they are never as nice as you think. So by just laying this on and a gentle press will be absolutely fine. Don't think you need to stuff it around cables and, you know, hammers and pry bars and all the rest of it, because technically just laying it over it will be enough just to put that hard edge into it, just like that. 5. What's 5? Oh, 1/35. Right, got you. No problem. Joe says, my first time live streaming. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you, Phil, for your clear and simple advice. Thank you. No problem at all. Welcome to the actual live show. Phil says, just come on the 1/24th Spitfire with a mask set. Now wishing I'd freehanded it with soft edges. Again, that's a classic example. When you're doing the bigger scales, it lends itself quite nicely, because as soon as you start putting masking sets and you get that sort of tight edge onto it, you slip into the sort of toy thing of it, or the sort of die cast way of it. And don't forget, for many years, to be honest, I'll be honest with you, I was struggling to make ends meet. Doing the commission work, because it wasn't, you know, readily available to start with, as you can imagine. So I found a little bit of a niche, respraying die cast and mahogany models. So people would send me old die cast stuff that was pretty knackered and horrible, and then I would go around, fill it, and then prime and respray it all to have a nicer finish. And then I used to end up doing brand new ones that guys would send me. To be honest, I did a couple of Victors. When they released the Victor Corgi, I did a few of those as well, and that's 72nd, and I did them all with tack worms. Tack wormed them up and then sprayed them, which is probably exactly the same way as I do to the FX one if I was doing it tomorrow, with that nice grey and green camo that they have. They have the grey underside and the grey and green on top. It's a lovely camo scheme. And I think they look great in it. But again, because it's 72nd, I think you need the worms. Yet when I did other types of stuff, if it was 48th and bigger, then obviously I'd go straight in there, like the 24th scale stuff, then I'd go in there and do it all freehand. And just the same way as we did the Spitfire. If you go back and have a look at the Spitfire, the other one was the Typhoon. You remember back when we did the Typhoon? Great little thing with that. By doing it freehand, it naturally gave it that worn, weathered look. So as soon as you start coming in with other things like washes, and we sanded the paintwork and did all those things to it, it lends itself so very, very well to all those things. Yet if it was a hard edge onto it, trying to distress it and make it soft, the only way you could do it is to somewhat sand it, and then you're in the realms of going too far, because you know the edge is going to be thicker than anywhere else, and you could end up taking paint off too much each side of the actual edge mark. So from that point of view, it's automatically just helping you out right the way through. But again, it is one of those things. We're not saying that you should just pick up your airbrush and start spraying with it like it, because sometimes, you know, things aren't easy. It takes a little bit of getting used to, finding the angles, getting comfy. But most of all, like we're trying to explain on this, is making sure your airbrush is happy to bring out that fine little jet of paint constantly for the time you're airbrushing. And especially when you're doing bigger stuff, you want it to be that thing where when you pull that trigger and you're in that zone, you want it to be doing just that same from the moment you start to the moment you stop. You don't want it to be going along and it fades off to nothing. Okay, that's bad, okay, because then what happens is you pull back on the trigger, and we're all guilty of it, and you pull back and you pull back, and then all of a sudden it coughs because it clears whatever the blockage is, and you end up with a splat all over your model, and you're in a lot of trouble with it. Okay, so from that point of view, if you got it right to start with, it makes the entire thing easier. And that's what I'm trying to do with these live ones, and explain that if everything's working right, it's a pleasure. But I know, because I hear it all the time, people struggle, they have issues, hit this with this, that and the other, and most of the time I just think it's not ignorance, because that's the wrong word, but people don't understand what's going on, the reasons behind it, which usually are a little thing. But as we've spoken about over the last few weeks doing this, there's lots of little things that can be problematic. So just finding what it is, and again, like we're saying all the way through, knowledge is power with this. As soon as you know whilst it's doing it, you can stop, adjust it, fix it, and then carry on, and you won't have a problem with it. So from that point of view, just go with it. Practice, 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 we'll keep it going. So down on here, we're all nicely totally dry, and we're looking pretty good down here. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just have a go with a few more worms around this one, and we'll put some on the other side, and we'll do some tidy up work, and then I'm going to show you what to do when it all goes wrong. Is it worth spraying along the edges? You can do. The trouble with that is, if you've already got down a hard edge and then you try and come in with a soft edge, it's getting the blend. It might look like a light fuzzy pattern over top of the edge because it's not just falling naturally into the other. What you could do though is step in. Okay, so from that point of view, if you were doing something like on this, okay, and you were done, you know, assume this is your hard edge one we've done down here on the sort of leaf work. Okay, so you've done that, right, and then you want to put in a soft edge. If you were just to come along, you're going to end up with a pattern. But what you could do is use that as a start point, and then just spray from this side going inwards, and just work that same edge, and you'll notice it will soften up. But always be shooting inwards, so that way you get a nice build up, and it will go around. But if you just pop around the edge, you're just going to end up with a fuzzy edge over it, instead of having something a little bit more softer that blends nicely into each other. Okay, or on these sides, as you see it here, as they literally just go one to the other with no real problem. All right, so again, it's just one of those things of, you know, in some ways, yes, it's a great idea. In other ways, you might actually make more work for yourself. Okay, so from that point of view, it's just one of those things that's personal preference and the way you go around with it. The other thing you can do though is use something like this. If you're not too sure and you know, just say, of going through the motions of it, then just jump to a tackworm and put your tackworm to the inside, and you have a nice little one. You can use that then as a mask, and then put the tackworm, and that will give you a nice softer line right the way through with it. So if we try and do something with this, which I'm not totally sure what we're going to do, but I'll tell you what, we'll just carry on with what we had down in here, I'm thinking. So when we're putting this down and on, we've got to come to the inside of the actual grey, because the thing is, if we're on the outside of it or we're too near, we're going to end up with the brown you're still going to see poking through just a little bit. Okay, so from our point of view, what we want to do is try and keep it all going the same way. Okay, so what we're going to do is just going to put it down, and we're coming to the inside, and now we're just pressing this from the top so it squashes down. And then if you have got an area just down like that, see, look, these cutters are great, they do everything. Okay, you can just come down in there. Okay, you can put a little bit in, and then what we do, we just do down on the other side. Okay, and then just down in here. What we're going to do, just going to mold that around there, and then down there, and then we've got a little bit down there by the flapper on, is it? No, it's actually a flap on that, isn't it? I forgot the ailerons out the end here on these. Okay, so we just poke that down there, then hopefully we might just squeeze enough to do this. I've actually got buckets of this stuff, but there we go. Okay, so again, just thinking about how it's going to go. Okay, now a lot of times what people will do when you're doing stuff like this is that they won't bother doing that. Trust me, it's worth doing it, or trying to manipulate it so it all goes in together, because otherwise what can happen is you end up with a tiny bit of overspray in there, which is a right ball ache because it's literally just that tiny bit. And if you'd just done it instead of avoiding it, again, it saves you a bit of time. The old wishy tape. Okay. This is just my cheap wishy tape versus using Tamia tape. Okay, so I'll pop that down in there. Over on that. Okay. So then what you can do, what we'll do here, we'll show you about joining up the two halves of it together. Okay, so again, exactly as we did before, we just got it on this edge. Okay, spray. Always give it a little bit of a pump if you haven't used it for a while. That'll just blow anything that's on the end of the needle. Okay, but again, don't have it screaming, just the amount of air you need to make things work. Okay, and then here, just be a quick job, we can just keep in on top, just taking out, doing that wingtip, making sure the entire is covered. Okay. Okay, backfill him. Okay, just down on there like that. Alright. So, same thing again, never take this off till it's totally dry, but we're just going to pull it off anyway. Okay. And there we go. Just down on there like that. Okay, so we just let that dry a sec, then we just join up the camos. Okay. So we just take that off. And it's funny because Tamia tape doesn't grip this stuff as much as wishy tape does. So if you've got a situation and you want the camos to sort of join up and all the rest of it, make sure that's totally dry first. So what we'll do is we'll just up the air pressure. Okay, just there. Blow that down. Nice and dry. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to grab a couple of bits of this. And we'll just join them up. Okay. I don't know what keeps turning off and turning back on. I'm hoping it's my mouse or something else like that, or the keyboard. Could be the keyboard. As long as you guys are all still here, that's the main thing. Let me just check over there. It does worry me when it goes beep, beep, beep. Okay, that's good. Okay, so what we're going to do, just down on here, we're going to join this camo into here. Okay, so as if it was naturally one. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mask past here, and then we're going to pull this down, and we're making obviously an imaginary camo pattern. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're just going to pop this in and around like that. Okay, so that's quite nice. Ooh, my other scissors are actually. I don't know why we're using these, but hey ho. Alright, so just tucked it slightly underneath. Okay, so that's going to go in on that side. And then over here, we're going to pretend this has gone over the top and it's washed in. But again, if you warm up this, absolutely great. Okay, and then again we're going to go from past where you've got it, pulling it slightly. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just pulling it down a little bit. All of those areas, tucking them in. And then we're going to go right across and onto this area down in here, because that's how we're going to blend them down. Okay, so actually I'll tell you what we can do. We take that to there. Okay, and what we'll do, we're just going to backfill with a little bit of this stuff. Okay, we'll just use a little bit of this stuff just down in there. So at this point we can just add to the curve to make it sort of blend a little bit better. Just making sure this is tucked in. They're in there nicely. Happy of how that all is. Okay, air pressure back again, because obviously you don't need it, because don't forget, high air pressure, all you're doing is putting it everywhere you don't want it. Okay, so this is in. So what we're going to do is go right past it as well. So 90 degrees straight down, over the top, and you're literally just waiting for it to disappear. Okay, so we've got grey on this side, so what we're going to do, we've got to be careful because your angles, because you don't want to shoot this way down in here, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to actually fill in and go right up to the actual tack itself. And obviously if you go to the tack itself, no soft edge, so you still need to keep it 90 degrees. So what we're going to do is come in from this area and then just backfilling just that line, and then the spine we sort of roll over as we get near the spine. Okay, a little bit more just on that last. Cut into air, just drying down now. Just so it can get in there to handle it. And what we're looking for is it to be seamless joined between the two. Okay, and if it's seamless, we know we're onto a bit of a winner. Okay, so if we just zoom in the camera for the ta-da moment, if it has worked. Okay, so okay, so if you've got that, don't panic, just roll it up in your hand and then stick. What that is purely because this isn't dry yet, but it won't matter. It's got a light white mark there, but that will go, all right? And then we can take this off and then we're left there with that, okay? But this mark here, chances are it will be fine, but if you wanted to, you could just get in there and slightly backfill it. So you could mask it, or you can just come in freehand. Another bit just there, okay, and you can backfill it off. Just like that, okay, so it's not really a massive problem. And then again, same thing you can do if you want to change slightly things, like here, it's a bit of a nasty angle on that one. So what we're going to do, we're just going to come in and we're just going to literally curve that off just the tiniest bit, just to put a better line on that one, just like that. Okay, so you can come in and perhaps down in here, you want to make that more of a curved line into itself. Okay, and you can do that. You can just go in there and just adjust things on the fly just to make them that little bit nicer as you go right the way through with it. Okay, no problem, Brian. Great to have you here tonight. We'll catch you very, very soon. Okay, so there we go. That is about it. So any questions up till now, or are we all good? As I say, if you've got any questions, doesn't matter what they are, shout them out. And then obviously we can talk about them as we do this, all right? Does anybody have any other things? Have you seen Squash Man down here, how that's going? Right, it looks easy with Tamia paints, but I work with Vallejo and I have to stop always because the paint dries on the needle, even with the retarder in the paint. Yeah, to be honest, we did it last week or a couple of weeks ago. You can spray equally well, and don't forget we did under here with Vallejo. There is no difference as long as your paint mix is flowing and running just as well. Honestly, you shouldn't have any more problems with it. I don't have any less problems with Tamia than I do actually with using Vallejo or anybody else's. To be honest, it's just one of those things. When things are running right and it's running very smooth, then you should be good to go with it. At the end of the day, practice with your paint flows, you know, just make sure that you're actually getting that thing where the airbrush is sounding nice, because what it'll do then is clear itself. If you've got this thing where it stops starting and it's drying on the needle, it's not clearing the needle, okay? So what you need it to do is physically, what is it, actually atomizing the paint, and it's going down that needle, getting to the end, and then being fluffed, as I call it, or puffed, okay? So from that point, if it's always doing that and it's nice and clean, you have no problem. The trouble you have is actually when you perhaps haven't got enough air pressure, or your paint's too thick, then you get a skin form on the needle, and then you can physically almost pull it off. Okay, so if it's not clearing the needle particularly well, then that can be a problem. The other thing you can do as well is a little cheat. If you take some needle juice, badger call it, or you know, with super lube, things like that, if you coat the tip of the needle with that, that will stop drying on the end. But a lot of people automatically jump in and come in with the retarders. The retarders are only as good as your actual paint mix as well. It needs to all sort of work together. Retarders, like I am sweating here, to be honest. It's really, really warm in here. With all the lights and everything going on here and in the sun, it's cooking. But we haven't done anything, and we're using lacquer thinners, and lacquer thinners technically dries quicker than X28, so I should be having more stop-start problems with it. But again, it's clearing the needle, it's keeping the needle nice and clean, and it's just blowing through all the time. As long as everything's flowing, then there's no problem. It's when you get the stop-start. So the stop-start can be a couple of things. It could be something in the mix, i.e. it's a thicker pigment. Okay, so you haven't done a proper paint mix like we've done down in here. So what's happened is that you're spraying and it's great, okay, and then all of a sudden it's got a thicker bit of paint's gone down. It's having trouble atomizing. The paint flow physically slows down, then it starts to dry, okay, and then it starts to dry, and then you're blowing it out and everything else like that. So again, a good ratio, good thickness of paint, and it's running well. You won't have that stop and start. The other thing as well is that if you've got too much air, okay, it can dry the needle artificially, because it's got so much air going past it, it's drying it as well. So it's drying on the needle, it causes problems and stuff like that. So Vallejo's, as I said, we've done it with Vallejo's the other week, and we did all the testing with it, and it works equally as well as we did with this. We couldn't find any difference between enamels really, Vallejo's, Tamia and lacquers, apart from the drying times. Obviously the enamels took forever to dry, I think they were still wet the next day, versus, you know, everybody else's dried really, really quickly. Vallejo took a lot longer to dry. Again, you'd think then in that way it wouldn't dry as quickly in your needle, so chances are it's probably not that is the problem. Okay. Again, I think sometimes it's that thing where people, they'll, you know, retarder and stuff like that. It sounds like a great idea, but it's not like a silver bullet that's going to fix everything. It just needs to be right somewhat in the first place. Retarders and stuff like that, I think they work great. Like in here, in theory, we should be using it, but you know, if it's just normal paintwork, you really would never need them. But I know people who put them in because it helps with flow, and it's like chances are they're thinning their paint a little bit more than normal because they're using a retarder, and that's what it is, and keeps things slipping. But again, everybody's different. Like I say, listen to your airbrush. How's it sounding? If it's sounding crackly, if it's having trouble, then obviously go back and have another look at it. Right, okay, so you've done your work, you're really happy with it and everything else like that. All right, so now perhaps you want to go in and just sort of, you know, change some of the colors, just a little bit of breaking it up. So maybe you want to come in with a little bit of post shading of what you're doing and everything else down in here. It's great because you've got the color in your color cup, as we have here. Okay, so what you can do is just come in with one of the other colors. So we've got a tiny little bit of the lighter one down in here. So what I'm going to do is just going to mix a few drops in, not tons of it, because we don't want to change the world, as I call it. So what we're going to do is just color shift, just going to change the tone just a little bit. Okay, so you've got it in here. Now the trouble is, if you put that on there, it's going to change the color too much. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this, make a new batch. Okay, and then we're going to do like a 50-50 mix in here. So if you think about it now, it's over thinned. Okay. So technically what you've done is made like almost a wash, but a very, very thin version of. So if you look down in here, yeah, needle juice is actually quite good stuff. But what you need to do is you take the needle out of your actual airbrush, give it a rub right the way down the entire thing, and then literally take it all off as if you would with your fingers. It's a micro amount on there, but what it'll do, it'll give you probably half an hour's playtime on your airbrush, depending on obviously on how much you're using it and how much paint's going through it, but it'll keep your airbrush flowing really, really nicely. Okay, so we're just going to dump this out and we're just blown it through. Okay, so we come straight back in without cleaning the airbrush with this stuff. Okay, so this is, as you'll see down here, totally different shade. Did you hear the difference with the airbrush? You hear how this is like singing now? It's because it's very, very thin stuff. Okay, so what you do, you come along to your, now because this is thinned, it's not actually going to paint as heavy on your model, all right? So it enables you to be able to go right up to the edge if you want to, and it's not going to paint this all green because actually it's a very, very thin mix. So what you can then start to do is just come in. So I'm going to pick out this square panel on this wingtip just here, and we're just going to pop in there and we're just going to put some little spirals and swirls around in here. Okay, so it's quite a wet mix, and to be honest I need to knock back the airbrush out a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to dry that back because it's very, very wet, but what it'll do, it'll just shift the actual colour. Okay, so I'll get my hair on par here. Okay, so what we're going to do is just going to grab this little area here and just on the actual aileron. But what this will do as well, it will slightly change everything that's going on. And don't be frightened to go back over it again and again. Okay, so we've just gone in there and just started to knock around, but also you can see how it, remember we had all those lines in there? It's blended them all together now because it's more thinners than anything else. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to come over here and we're going to do the same. And we shoot in. But what this enables you to do is actually zip around pretty much anywhere you like without the risk of overspray, because we're going pretty close to the edge. Okay, but we're not, you can see where I've been on there, as you can see we're not making overspray because it's so thin. So it actually isn't going to make any difference with one pass. So you can just pop around with this guy. And it looks wet and very green when it first goes down, but it will dry back, but it's not going to do much. But all you're doing is just breaking up the solid colour. Okay, now down in here we can be a bit more liberal with it. Okay, these little access points. What I tend to do is I find a panel and I'll just work it. Okay, just work the panel and then go elsewhere. But because it's thin, you don't have to worry about overspray. Okay, it's fine. And there we go. Okay, but also you can see it's still wet on there where I've been round with it. It just lightly changes it. Now this is one of those things, it's personal choice and you can get in the realms of fights over this, but literally you can make it as many shades or as less as you want to. What I would recommend is probably doing it over 2 shades. Okay, so you have this shade, so you've got the option then, you can think to yourself, okay, really like that, no problem. If I go back with the original colour or even a slightly darker shade of the original colour and just do things like access points, panel lines, stuff like that, and then you're in the realms of pre-shading, which we'll cover a lot more in detail a little bit further down the line. Okay, but for the moment what this will do also, it blends the paint together. So if you've got some lines where you've been going freehand, because this is a lot of thinners in here, it sort of just blends everything together and keeps everything nice and smooth and moving and everything else like that. Okay, but you can literally change things quite a bit if you keep going over them. So you can pick out panel lines perhaps, okay, and little T areas and stuff, and just keep going around it. And also you can fix little mistakes. So if you go in there and you've noticed, oh, it's a little bit faint there, I need to go in a bit more, you can put in quite a bit more. Okay, and just keep working the problem at it. But you can, to be honest, because it's a thin, you can actually put down quite a lot of paint without the worry. And to be honest, this colour here is a little bit of a nightmare because it's high contrast. But if you were doing different shades of grey, for instance, and you were coming in with like a modern, you know, F14, F18, F15, you could really plaster it on quite heavily because no one's going to care if you go slightly off, especially from light to dark and dark to light on those colours. When using green and grey, high contrast, you're probably not going to get away with it as much. But generally you can work it round in there. The other thing you can do obviously is come in with like a wash type situation and airbrush that in post shading. Again, we'll go into more of these afterwards, but you can come in and almost like a filter coat, a very, very thin smoke coat, and go right over the entire thing with it, but picking out things of interest, i.e. panel lines, flaps, access panels, you know, things like that. And you can put a little bit more down there and just modulate the entire colour, which I know obviously you take from the Armour guys, they're out there with paintbrushes washing it in. Most of the time I tend to do it with an airbrush, purely because I prefer the effect, and I think it's a more natural effect on an aircraft to have things airbrushed on because of airflow and stuff like that than it would be like with Armour where it would cling and build up in areas, because with aircraft they don't tend to do that. But there we go, hopefully you've learnt a few things tonight. So, any questions out there? Anybody got any questions? Let me just check the forum. Last time I checked, nobody posted anything in here. Okay, I don't know what it says. Oh, go offline. You are offline. God, which one am I on? I don't know these days. Right, okay, hold on. Let me just refresh that. Nope, that one's all quiet in there. I don't know if we've gone live yet for the actual vlog. If not, we'll talk all about this in the actual vlog. Okay. Right, okie dokie. Are we all still okay in the chat room? Somebody give me a thumbs up to let me know we're still working, because I'm not still quite sure why I keep getting the old USB song playing as we make our way through. So that all seems okay. We're all alright in there. Thing is, I have to wait for you guys because you're on a delay. You're a little bit behind me and things like that. But as you can see, look how flat that's gone. Now imagine that on your model and it starts to flatten down and stuff like that. It's always going to cause a little bit of a problem if it's actually on your model, especially if you've got something like that on Armour. And my worry would be if you've got stowage items or photo etch and that starts to seep through, how are you going to get it off? That is my only trouble with this stuff. So that's why I must admit I don't tend to use it. But as I said before, if it's a quick job, you'll be absolutely fine with it. Thank you, Krista. Stefan, guys, you're all still here. Thank God for that. Right, okay, does anybody have any questions? If you've got any questions, shout out now if you want to know about different types of paints and things. So I think that's probably about as far as we want to go tonight, otherwise we're going to start to move into realms of things we want to do next week and stuff like that, alright? But again, you know, a lot of this isn't luck or anything else. This is just me taking my time, making sure that paint, the airbrush and everything, when they're all working together, it's a happy time. And we haven't had really a single problem airbrushing here over the last, what, 4 nights now. We've been doing this 4 nights live. We've not had really an issue. We had a couple of little stops and starts. You might remember a couple of issues when we were using lacquers of all things. You think they'd work even better, but generally it's just one of those things where, you know, taking your time, taking the steps. Try not to be like me, because I am the world's worst at this. What happens is that I get so tied up in my little world and trying to make sure everything's done and you've got videos to watch, I take shortcuts. The shortcuts will always come back and bite you. And if you ever notice when you see these master modelers, right, little Japanese people, how methodical they are in everything they do. And to me, it drives me mad, because I'm like, you know, roadrunner with my head cut off, okay, and I just want to get on and get moving with it. But you see these guys and they are so methodical. That's why they're so good, because they make sure everything is perfect. They make up their paint extremely carefully. They make sure it goes into the airbrush. They don't just dump it in. They place it in nicely. They check their flow. They're putting it down. It's care. And at the end of the day, if you're careful with your airbrushing and that, a lot of those little things you know, can be avoided. And the other thing as well is stress. As soon as you get stressed out, you get annoyed with things that's not working well. I'm the worst stress head there is, and it is that thing when things are working well, like it's done tonight. Everything's worked perfectly for me. It's been a nice experience, and you come away thinking that was really done well. Again, it's just care, time, taking it. If I was doing this on my own, chances are I wouldn't be as nice making this up. I'd chuck it together and spray it on. It gets a little bit sticky, the trigger, the paint's not flowing correctly. I'll be upping the air pressure and pulling further back on the trigger. Technically that's the worst thing you want to do, because the paint, your airbrush is telling you there's something wrong that needs fixing. But you can push through it if you wanted to, but not necessarily the correct way of doing things. So you just want to take your time with it and make sure you're absolutely fine. Right, how comes everyone's coming in now? We've got a load of people have joined us. We've had like 9 people have joined us in the last minute. Where have you all been? Has it been down the pub and I didn't know about it? Okay, but there we go. So tonight, literally camo work. Simple, hand painting it on, no problems at all. Putting down normal paint again over multiple different colours. Hopefully, I don't know how well the light in here, we're starting to lose it a little bit. You might see the difference down under here. You see this one here and this side, they are slightly different. The trouble with that is this was that dark brown and this was the white. So you can see sometimes a nice light coat gives a nicer look right the way through. Okay. Welcome, Tomas. Nice to have you here. Krista. Who? Molto. Have a nice liquid mask pen. Oh, they're the people, aren't they, that do the chrome one, if I remember rightly. I post my test with them in the forum. Oh, I'll have to have a look at that afterwards. I will go and have a look at that, I must admit. Is it literally you just put it on like a pen and it comes off? Or is it one of those that goes on and you have to, like, you know, scrape it to get it off? That would be my worry. They do some very nice colours though, that company. I must admit, when I went through it and we're looking at pens in general and all the stuff they do, it's like, wow, they actually do some really nice stuff down there. See, look, everybody's coming in the chat room and everyone's joining the show. Did no one get the memo that we actually started almost 2 hours ago? Where have you been? Right, so that is it about me for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it interesting. I'm glad it's just working, quite frankly. It could always be like car crash TV doing this airbrushing live, but actually it's working out very well. Just a short thing. The vlog will be up after this. I'll put that up in a moment, as long as it has done it already. If not, just a quick reminder to everybody, the forum is going to change tomorrow, okay? Remember, I'm going to be on the forum literally all weekend and all day tomorrow as well. So if you've got any questions, you're not quite sure where things are, then just post them up, send me a PM, or we'll start a thread perhaps on the actual the forum as well, and I'll be able to hopefully put you in the right direction. But physically, nothing's changed. It's just things are in different places, which it just looks different, but actually everything exactly where it is. Just that some things have different names. Your email thing's totally different as well. That looks completely weird, but actually I've been using it now for a week. I actually really like the new way of doing it. It's a lot better than it used to be. Still here and enjoying the evening. I'll put some of these tips to test. No problem, Paul. Again, the thing is, I'm not trying to lecture anybody on airbrushing. At the end of the day, it's one of those things, it's very, very personal. It's like the airbrush you use, okay? So from my point of view, what I'm trying to do is sort of instill the thing of taking some of the basics about listening to your airbrush. I think that's really, really important, okay? And don't listen to this thing about 60%, thinners, and, you want to be spraying 18 PSI and you want to be 18 millimeters away and all of this. Forget it. Weather is very much effective, okay? Doing those simple exercises we did before really is a good grounding. Most people, in fact, I would actually hedge my bets, 90% of people have never done this before in their life. They've just picked up an airbrush and sprayed a model. I don't know, perhaps we'll do a poll. How many of you guys have actually done this before you've heard me say about it? It's a good grounding because you can actually see what you're doing, okay, for the first time. When you're spraying a model, I can't see anything. If doing this type of work, it could be absolutely anything going on down there. But when you do something like this, you can see exactly what your airbrush is up to, what's going on with it, the actual airflow, the paint flow, and how far you need to be away. It's very, very interesting little exercise to do. And that way, I think it just grounds you to make you a slightly better modeler. I see all too often people testing airflow, and, I can airbrush and do it on paper towel. Yeah, don't take any notice of anybody who does anything demoing like that, because at the end of the day it's like a false positive, because it just will stick, but it's not showing you actually what your paint's doing when it's on the surface of your model and stuff like that. So again, I think it's just one of those little exercises where you'll be amazed and surprised with yourself. And it might seem like torture for all you poor guys who used to come here for airbrushing courses and stuff like that, because it's to make you all do it. but it's one of those things, you take it away and it's like, I understand it now, and you understand what I'm on about a little bit better. So hopefully it's what I'm trying to do is with this is just sort of show you, give you the basics, and then that way with your setup, your air pressures, your airbrushes, your needle sizes, your environment, it's just got that basics of like to understand what's going on around it, so you can then be informed and make better decisions about your paint mixes, your distances, your air pressures and everything else like that. Right. Nope, never done it before. I've learned from it. Good, that's very good, Paul. As I say, it's one of those things. Did it, but no idea what I was doing. That's probably more than one. Most people do. You know, it's a bit like I used to do the thing as well, which is really horrible in hindsight. You look back, but again, it's a nice way of understanding how people airbrush. And I used to say to you, right, do noughts and crosses on a bit of plastic and just show me. So mix up some paint, and I'd watch people do it just to see how they do it. And it would just be, you know, some things like people just stick paint into a colour cup, put the paint in first before the thinners. No, if you're going to do it, make sure thinner's always going first, you know, and various things like that. And it's just little things, and it's like people are like, I didn't know that, and it's like, well, there you go, you see, and you'll just be easy with it. That's all we're trying to do here, is just give you little informed, little bits of nuggets of information, and hopefully a few little light bulb moments along the way. Great evening, thanks. No problem, Robbie. It's been a pleasure with everybody. As I say, it's been a strange week for me because I haven't done any modelling. This is the first technical modelling of anything I've done this week, amazingly. I've done loads of editing and stuff like that, but I've done no actual modelling work. So in some ways, I'm feeling quite jealous now. I could get really carried away doing this. I think, yeah, we'll get the metal work done and everything, canopy. In fact, I'm just wondering where the rest of the model is. It must be up there somewhere. I could actually finish it off. Some poor kid get his done. So there we go, that is it for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. Not sure there will be one next week. To be honest, we've got friends down and things like that. Might be a little bit difficult, but if not, I'll be back with you in 2 weeks. Again, apologies for the vlog being up late. It's not me, it's YouTube. It is sat there waiting, and I'll put it up there live now as soon as we come off air. And then tomorrow, obviously big changes with the forum. Stick with me, trust me, it's really good. It's a lot better than it used to be and everything else like that. And I hope you're enjoying the site and making it a little bit easier to find around there. And thank you to everybody who sent me little things saying that's not working, you need to do this, that. It has, it's been a big help to me. Phil says, I've been avoiding following your airbrushing shows for the last few weeks, having returned to the hobby after seeing what like seems eternity. I have one of the early, sorry, people are writing and it's going up. I have one of, sorry, where is it? I've lost the spot now. Right, everyone stop typing. I have a lovely Edar 148 Spitfire Mark 9 that I've used Vallejo air underneath and guns on the top surface. Would I be able to use Hans's technique for covering the airbrush work with a coat of self-leveling thinners? Would it work with the Vallejo? Many thanks, first ever post. Welcome, Philip, great to have you here. Great name as well, although you spell yours wrong. Yeah, don't put model self-leveling thinners near Vallejo. But once it's on and dry, it's not so much of a problem. So what you want to do is, you don't need to mask it or anything else, but if you're going to do Hans's little trick, which does work, just literally airbrush on to the top, but don't put it onto the Vallejo. If you get a little bit on there, it's not going to hurt, but don't touch it, because what it will do is turn it to bubble gum and it goes all funny if you touch it. But if it just dries on the surface, it'll be absolutely fine. You'll have no problem with it. So from that point of view, you should be okay. But if you are doing like the top of the Spitfire like this, what you want to do is keep it flat, brush it on, airbrush it on all over it, then just put it down and leave it. Don't go near it, don't tip it, don't anything whatsoever. Okay, and you'll see what happens with it. It doesn't always work, but when it does, it works really well. So from that point of view, it's great. Loads of light bulb moments. This interactive tutorial is great. Thank you, Paul. Stefan says, work only on paper with ink-based colours, but never tried it on plastic. Yeah, trust me, give it a whirl on the plastic. You'll be amazed to see what you're doing. We'll try the German tonight. That's Stefan. Night Fighters Worn Camo. Yeah. With that, I would say blues. As I say, go and have a look at my Halifax build. for doing black work, like on night fighters and things like that, what you can actually do is, if it's got the black undersides on them, if you go in there with hints of blue, it's one of those things that didn't really show up on camera too well when I actually did the video build of it. But when you show people, they're like, what colour's that? And it's really hard to know what it is. But it's because I added blue into the black, which gives it this, I don't know, it's almost like a deep, deep black colour. But you don't think it's blue. When you tell people it's got blue in it, they're like, blue? They're like, yeah, it's got blue in it. But go off and have a Halifax, look at the Halifax build for the underside where we did all that black work on it, because I actually put blue with it and it worked an absolute treat. Right, that is it for me tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. I'm off now to put up the vlog, which will hopefully be there very, very shortly. Okay, so until tomorrow, everybody, happy modelling, take care. I'll be with you, and obviously we'll sort out everything with you tomorrow for the actual switch on of the new forum and stuff like that. So till later, everybody, happy modelling, take care, and I'll see you all very, very soon.